So, your name? Mario. So Mario made some excellent suggestions on trying to address the state's efforts to increase the housing supply. One is to provide some flexibility in terms of the requirement that the state is trying to impose, and specifically there's a bill, SB 50, introduced by a state senator from San Francisco, who's basically trying to take local control, override local control in order to, where communities have not been meeting their housing targets of building and increasing the housing supply. Recognizing that there are intersections that have these basically the worst traffic. Intersections get graded on a scale of A through F in terms of how bad the traffic is, and so if I understand correctly, you're saying that
I want
give
that
a break
to be a factor also in there, because just saying that there's a bus stop near you and that way you ought to have more housing, to me is kind of a, for lack of a better term, a weasel move. I'd rather that they also take into account that, if I don't want to steal the show, but if the road right now is graded at a failing level, you shouldn't be able to dense pack it even more around that road. I mean, that's the concept.
Sure.
That's the plan, sir. High density living.
Okay,
No personal mobility devices.
Sure. All right. So let me. So that was the first part of his question. The second part of his of your question.
Well, I'm just saying, so take that same, again, the legislature is trying to create incentives for more housing, but I'm trying to say, okay, it doesn't have to be here. There's areas in California.
Oh yeah, the cap and trade idea. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when you do a cap and trade sort of thing with, so create the housing incentives in other places where there is some infrastructure, but it's not built out.
Yeah. So, I've actually been exploring that idea of a cap and trade system for housing.
Oh my God.
That if there are communities, and Councilman, I would love to hear what you might think about this. But if there are communities that are willing to pay for affordable housing to be developed in other communities in exchange for not having to build more housing in their communities, then that can kind of create at least a balancing of incentives, so that if the financial cost is worth not having to increase density in your communities, that might be a rational way to try to distribute the challenge of building more housing.
So one way of summarizing that might be, maybe you would agree with this idea, try to make it a win-win situation,
right,
rather than a win-lose situation or a lose-lose situation, where you could say, okay, if these intersections in Torrance are on the low end, are say what you call failing intersections.
Yeah.
All right, the city's built out, and the density is there, and it's taking us 45 minutes to get out of Torrance just to make it to a freeway. If that's the situation in Torrance, then they can trade something of value to, say, Victorville or Palmdale. Is that what you're saying?
In a rough sense, yes. The bottom line being, if the place is already saturated,
yes,
okay, we shouldn't all have a further degradation in quality of life. So if I have to invest something,
yes,
okay, whether it's a tax, I'd rather it be to some economic good and let somebody else have that housing.
So it could be redefined in a win-win sort of way, rather than a win-lose situation.
Sure, except, as in, life, things, things could get complicated. One of the, I've always, believed that the ideal solution would be to, focus more, invest more inland in California so that we can create more jobs in inland California and thereby try to alleviate the burden.
Idea.
Yeah, it's the same idea, but the challenge though is that the jobs are on the coast.
Yeah.
You know, we basically have a situation of two Californias where the coastal California is prospering, but inland California, isn't creating the same number of jobs, and so that's why we're dealing with these situations where people are commuting, 1-2 hours.
We need to have some more public-private partnerships to sort of incentivize the lowering of person miles on the road. If you can incentivize businesses to have more telecommuting, et cetera, that's just if somebody doesn't have to travel 20 miles instead they only have to travel 3 miles.
Sure.
That's just 17 miles you just got rid of.
No, I think you have. It's a good idea. We need to encourage employers to be more flexible and providing good telecommuting options.
The immediate issue of being SB 50, I just went to a thing in Torrance and they told me about these accessory dwelling units. All of a sudden, as soon as that bill is passed, in 2017, the number of new accessory dwelling unit permits is going. They're being issued about 2 a week. So that's R1 being slowly eroded. So that to me, that's an issue, and I get it. Every single local official around here is crying for relief. So that's just 2 ideas to take back and see if you can offset that.
Any other thoughts? Yes, sir.